Making fresh pasta at home is not as intimidating as it may seem, and it's actually easier than you may think. Today you're going to learn how to make a basic flour and egg pasta dough and a flour and water pasta dough, and then turn that into 10 easy shapes of pasta you can make at home. Okay, so to start, we're gonna make first an egg yolk pasta dough. You can use whole eggs. I just personally prefer to always use just the egg yolks. I like the flavor, the color, the richness of the dough, but if you wanna use whole eggs, you can absolutely do that. Then I'm also gonna show you guys how to make a simple flour and water dough that we can use for some other shapes as well. So we've got 7 dozen egg yolks here, which may seem like a lot, but we're making a lot of pasta today. And then here we have 00 flour, a very finely milled, very delicate flour. This is 1,540 grams of flour. My ratio I like to do is about 220 grams of flour per every 12 egg yolks. So we'll go ahead and we're going to make a nice well with the flour. I like to use the bottom of the bowl just to make it nice and uniform. And then we'll take our egg yolks here, and you can always mix up the egg yolks ahead of time, but I like to just pour them in and then mix them up right in the well. So if you've never made fresh pasta by hand, I think it really is something that everyone should try. You can definitely do this in a KitchenAid mixer or a machine, but I think that doing it by hand, you just kind of really learn all the different motions and what everything should feel like, and it's really something that you should try out. So once you have your eggs and your flour in here, you'll take a fork, and we'll just start mixing up all these egg yolks. And once we have the egg yolks fully incorporated here together, we'll go ahead and we'll start bringing in some of the flour from the inside walls of the well. You just want to be careful to not, really break a well in the wall, because then you'll have eggs all over your kitchen and nobody really wants that. I've done it before, it sucks. So just be careful here, take your time, and slowly bring in more flour as you go. And the whole idea here is to basically form a thick paste with the eggs and the flour, because the whole idea here is to try to hydrate the flour, in this case with the eggs, or if you're doing flour and water, with the water. So we just keep introducing more flour into the eggs until we get that thick paste. All right, so once we kind of reach this very thick paste here with the eggs and the flour, that's kind of your sign that you can get rid of your fork and switch to a bench scraper, whether it be a plastic one or a metal one. I like to use the plastic ones. And now we're gonna go in and we'll basically start chopping the flour into the eggs just to kind of keep hydrating it. And you'll notice too, I won't necessarily bring in all that flour right away. I found that with making pasta, it's such a simple thing with only very few ingredients, as you can tell, that the variables are very much in play. So the humidity of the room that you're in, the size of the eggs, the moisture percentage of your flour, they all play a role. And it's always easier to add more flour in than it is to take it out. And once it kind of starts coming together and kind of resembles a little bit of a dough, but a very loose dough, you can kind of start getting in there with your hands, start bringing it all together to get ready to start kneading. So now we're getting into a ball of dough, so we'll kind of keep kneading it to form that gluten. And this is a process that really takes about 10 minutes of really, really good kneading. It's definitely an arm workout. Okay, so I've been kneading it now for about 5 minutes or so. And what I like to do is actually let it rest for about 5 minutes and then come back to kneading it for the last 5 minutes. So it's not quite ready yet. So we'll just place it on the board, cover it with a bowl, let it rest for 5 minutes, and then we'll come back and finish kneading it. All right, now that our dough is nice, fully kneaded, we've rested it for about 45 minutes, it's ready to get sheeted or rolled out, whichever you prefer. And you can use a rolling pin, you can use these hand crank machines, you can use the KitchenAid attachment, or you can use a big industrial commercial machine like I have. Whatever you have to use to roll this pasta dough out and get it as thin as we can to make all these different shapes. All right, so obviously we're not gonna sheet out all of this pasta at once, so we'll just cut off a nice little piece here. You can see really beautiful pasta dough. And so that the rest of it doesn't dry out while we're working with the little piece, we'll just wrap it up in plastic and leave it out until we're ready to use it. So I'll get a little bit of flour down on the board, and just to get it ready for the machine, I'll just kind of start flattening just a little bit with my hands and shaping it into almost a rectangle. And you can even use a rolling pin just to kind of set the shape. Not really to flatten it, but just to really set the shape. And even when you're using a hand crank machine, you want to start obviously on the thickest setting and then gradually work down to the thinner settings. You don't want to skip any settings, just kind of take your time. Okay, our sheet of pasta is now about 1 millimeter. You can probably see my hand right through it there. It's nice and thin. So now we can go ahead and start shaping this into a couple different shapes. Okay, so the first shape that we're gonna make with this sheet of dough is tagliatelle, which is very similar in size to fettuccine. So we'll take our sheet here. I like to do also my long pastas very long. You could obviously cut this a lot shorter. I just really like really long noodles. We'll hit it with some semolina flour, and then we'll go ahead and stack another sheet right on top of that. And same thing, a little bit of more dusting flour, just to help things from not sticking. So we'll go ahead and start rolling it up. I like to do, for this one, about 3 rolls. Then I'll turn it over, and same thing on this side, just to kind of meet in the middle. I'll hit it with a little bit more flour. All right, so we'll trim off a little bit of the edges, and then tagliatelle should be about 1/4 inch. All right, so they're all cut, so you'll take the back of your knife, come up, and you have your beautiful hand-cut, handmade tagliatelle. This can go right into the water now to cook. You could let it air dry for a little bit, or you can actually put it right in your freezer and it holds up really, really well in the freezer. Okay, so for pappardelle, we will, the same thickness as the tagliatelle, and same process too, which is as we cut the width, we're just gonna go a bit wider. Same thing, we'll fold it up. Hit it with a little bit more flour. And then personally, I don't know if this is right or wrong, but I like to do my pappardelle about 3/4 inch in width. And then same thing, we'll bring our knife up and show off our beautiful handmade, hand-cut pappardelle pasta. This is like a perfect shape for like slow braised ragouts and things like that. It's really, really good. All right, for this next shape, this is agnolotti, and this is far and away my favorite filled pasta shape. So we have our sheet of pasta here, nice and thin. This is just a ricotta cheese mixture. You could use a lot of different types of fillings though. And so we'll go ahead and pipe a nice even line of our filling. It's gonna even off the edges just a bit. And then we'll go ahead and actually take this edge of the dough and roll it right over the filling, just like that. So we have a nice long row of our filling. We'll make sure that's nice and secured. And then the real full proper name of agnolotti is agnolotti del plin, which means to pinch. So we'll go ahead in and start pinching our little pockets of pasta. And these are really basically just like fancy looking ravioli, right? So something fun you can do to impress your friends or family if you want to make fresh pasta and you wanted to make ravioli. Once we have that, we'll go ahead, and I have this nice fluted cutter here from Italy. If you don't have this, you can use a pizza cutter or a knife. This makes it just a little fancier. So we'll cut here, which is basically going to give the crown of the agnolotti. And then we'll go ahead and start cutting to form our individual pieces. And then these here, I would put right into the freezer to hold up before cooking, and they're good to go. All right, so for the next shape, we're making tortellini. So we'll take, this is like a, it's called a bicicletta. It's basically just like a long, multiple cutters at a time. Just makes things a little bit easier. So we'll go ahead there, and then we will go ahead and make our squares. And then a classic filling for this would be veal, pork, and prosciutto, but we're just gonna use the same filling we've been using. I like to mist it with just a little bit of water just to make sure that it's well hydrated and it sticks okay enough for us. So we'll go ahead and we'll fold it on top of itself to basically form like a little triangle, and kind of press in there just to expel any of that air. And then once it's here, you kind of form a ring around your index finger, press it to seal it. So we'll go ahead and do that with the rest of these. And then same thing, I'll pop these in the freezer with the agnolotti while we make the rest of the shapes. All right, for this next shape, this is called Cappelletti. So with this sheet of dough, we'll go ahead and cut out some circles here. And then using our filling, we'll pipe some directly in the center. We'll go ahead and mist it with a little bit of water, and then we'll start folding. All right, so to start, we'll fold over the dough on itself to kind of form a half moon shape. Same as the tortellini, kind of push out all that air from the center. And then we'll pick it up. And then you have your nice Cappelletti. All right, so for the next shape, this is called Garganelli, which is basically like a very fancy looking rigatone or a penne. So we'll go ahead and cut some squares. And then what we'll do here is we'll take our gnocchi board, we'll place it right on there like that, and then put it over our dowel rod and roll it like that, and you have a nice, beautiful Garganelli. All right, so for the next one, this is personally my favorite pasta shape of all time. I have a tattoo of it right there. This is Farfalle. You may know it as bow tie. So with our fluted cutter here, we're going to cut long fluted strips. And then we'll go ahead and cut these into individual rectangles. So we'll go ahead with the rectangles, just kind of pinch it right there in the middle. You can also kind of do it like this, fold it, and then pinch it. I like to pinch it though right on the table. And you get some beautiful farfalle. Now with these, I would like to let them dry out on the table for about 45 minutes or so before cooking them, or before transferring them to a container or your freezer or whatever it may be, just to kind of set the shape to ensure that when you cook it, it doesn't fall apart and it holds that beautiful bow tie shape. All right, for the last shape of pasta we're gonna make with the egg dough, this is called spaghetti alla chitarra. This is our chitarra, which is basically a pasta version of a guitar. So we've got the strings here. There's the thick side, and then there's also a skinnier side here, depending on what width of the pasta you wanna make. We're gonna do the wide one today. So we're gonna take our pasta dough here. I did a little bit of a thicker sheet on this one, just because I like this to be a little bit thicker. And then we're gonna dust it with the semolina. And then taking our rolling pin here, just to push it right through. And then you take it here, and you have your beautiful spaghetti alla chitarra. All right, so now we're going to make a flour and water dough. This is semola ramacianata, which is basically just a very finely milled semolina flour. This is about 700 grams right here. And then we have 350 grams of water. So very, very simple. And it's the exact same process as making the egg dough. We'll make a well with the flour. And this part isn't as satisfying as the eggs. Pour the water in there. And then since obviously the water doesn't need to be mixed up like the egg yolks do, we'll just start slowly incorporating that flour. Again, being sure not to break any of the wells. And so a lot of the shapes that you just saw me make with the egg yolk pasta dough, we wouldn't typically make those here with this flour and water dough. But we'll show you a couple different shapes that you can make with this dough in just a second. And again, we'll kind of get all these loose pieces back into the dough, start forming that dough, and then we'll knead it same way as with the egg dough. Okay, so now that our flour and water dough is fully rested, it looks beautiful, it's a nice, beautiful ball of dough. We can go ahead and make a couple different shapes with this. I'm gonna show you guys cavatelli and gnocchi sardi. Very similar, just a little bit of a difference between the two. So we'll cut into our dough there. It looks really good. And then here we're going to cut little strips that we can roll out into logs, because we're not going to sheet this pasta like the flour and egg. So we'll take this here, a little bit of flour down, and then using both hands, rolling it out into a very long snake. So for the cavatelli, first we're going to go through and cut little pieces. And then it's just as simple as with your thumb. And you can kind of see here, it's kind of rolling on top of itself to kind of give a little bit of a groove. Okay, for the next one, gnocchi sardi, we're going to again roll out a long snake of dough. And this is very similar to the cavatelli, but we're gonna put some really nice texture on this that you'll see here in just a second. So you'll take a piece of your dough here and using your thumb, roll it across the board to get some really, really great ridges on it. You can also too, if you don't want to use your thumb, you can use a butter knife and do the same thing. There's also like all kinds of different designs of boards you can get. This one's kind of like a honeycomb. Anything really that has texture will work great. You can use like a box cheese grater, you can use a colander, rocks glasses like cocktail glasses. The bottom of those have really great ridges and textures. Anything you have that can impart some texture works really good. And I like to store these right in the freezer, just with the cavatelli, until you're ready to cook them. Then you're good to go. So those are two basic shapes that you can make with flour and water dough that definitely are easy to make at home.